prayer. Since this, I read ahead, and since this is going to focus on women, I think a woman should read the prayer. That's my take on it. Any volunteers? There's so many women. Can't go wrong. You see where it says opening prayer?
Mm-hmm. I'll do it.
Okay.
Gracious God, you called us into being out of love. Stand with us as an expression of love and promise us forgiveness, redemption, and peace as a promise of love. Help us to trust your love and to share it far and wide. Amen.
Amen. And the focus verse is, do whatever he tells you. I'm sure all of you know who that is.
Do whatever he tells you.
Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay, session 2, Salvation Now. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
It's
Wasn't
good to
it a
have you
nice
here.
ride down the parkway? Beautiful.
Yeah. I wanted to leave earlier, but every time I get a new companion, so I got to go through the whole process of explaining. If I have someone who's not new, then I don't have to explain. I can just go. Unfortunately, it's always a new one on Thursday. So here we go. Tangible salvation now. Christians are bringers of wellness. Christians are bringers of wellness by Anna Madsen. I was first exposed to the formal pursuit of women's studies when I was in college in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Boy, that seems so long ago.
It's the last century.
Oh, there you go. Now you put it in perspective, Mary. Thank you. Last century. That we even needed an academic focus on women's studies switched on a light bulb for me. The fact that there wasn't a separate major dedicated to men's studies was also a revelation to me. I realized that the prevailing standard, the norm, was the life, experience, and perspective of a male. I began to see how women's lives and experiences and perspectives and ways of knowing were regularly rendered, here we go, diminutive. And right away I say diminished. Yeah, but I like the word diminished because it really, it's like a shrinkage, you know, shrinkage, diminished by society. Okay, I'm not going to read all the time. Judy, you're next, if you're able.
For example, women aren't actors, we're actresses. We aren't heroes, but heroines. We aren't drum majors, we're majorettes. We and our history were, and often still are, hidden under the term mankind, rather than being equally included, as with the words humankind or humanity. Even many of us women bristle at the idea that diminutive terms render us secondary or subservient to masculine norm. Yet we see how words do, in fact, shape our understanding of the baseline, when just for fun we imagine using the feminine terms as normative. Try calling George Clooney and Ryan Reynolds actresses, or Captain America a heroine. Now try imagining Neil Armstrong saying, "This is one small step for a human, one giant leap for a woman, This is one small step for a woman, one giant leap for womankind." Yes, whenever I hear that quote, I'm thinking, okay, Judy, put it in context. That really bothers me.
But that's what we said last week. Instead of saying Jew, we say Judeans. It makes such a difference because the Jew has a diminished, negative terminology. You're put in your place, you know, and it's not always a popular term of description. Let's put it that way. It is what it is. Who wants to read? Diane?
Sure. Then too, in other ways, we in our work have been rendered as less important. And as a society, we've adapted to and accepted this. Take, for example, the distinction between art and crafts. Museums certainly hold artwork by women. Georgia O'Keeffe, Anne Ancher, and Amy Sherald are three examples. But by and large, art, such as painting, sculpting, and architecture, has been the province of men. For most of us, it is far easier to produce a list of famous male artists than female ones. Crafts, however, such as quilting, knitting, felting, embroidery, scrapbooking, and doll making, are somehow seen as lesser examples of art, or even another category entirely. Yet it should not go unnoticed that these arts are rendered crafts, are not only the province of women, but the province of well-being of home and family. You see, quilts provide warmth. Knitting and felting provide clothing. Embroidery provides delight. Doll making provides hours of imaginative play for children. And scrapbooking preserves family memories.
Women have a remarkable knack for combining creativity with critical, important work. We bring things into being that are necessities, and we do it with flair. The Gospel of John provides a framework for empowering women to bring things into being as representatives of the God who also brings things into being. We don't have to and not to wait passively for the work of God to happen, but rather we can, in fact, ought to see ourselves as instruments of God called to do God's work. And if anyone knows that there's work to be done, it's women's. Let's get to work.
Share aloud or reflect. What are some ways that you are creative, even if those ways are not typically seen as such?
You are very creative. Yeah. And I'll give an example. The other day I made all these flower arrangements for the tables, and to me it was nothing, and everybody kept praising me, and I'm like, it was fun, but I don't think it was that big of a deal.
It made a lovely difference.
But they were lovely.
People were excited when they got to take them home.
But you also seek creativity. I mean, you
Yeah,
went to
well,
other.
I do. I
think it's great.
That's why I don't want to volunteer anymore, because I want to have the time to do that. I mean, like, I was so proud of myself that I got to do 6 paintings in the last 2 weeks. So.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And that was because of all the rain.
Right. True.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. You have a stair chair for an elevator inspector. You have a stair lift somewhere.
Stair lift that way, right? True,
But
yeah.
to me, it's considered crafts. It's not considered art.
But it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, when we had that flower show in Philadelphia,
Oh, yes.
arts. Because
Oh, yeah.
they judge all that creativity. I mean, I'm just amazed what they can do with.
But remember when Rosie Greer
Yeah.
started knitting
I was
and
trying
he
to
would
think
knit
of his name.
on a
Jimmy. Yes,
plane,
Rosie
and
Greer.
people went,
A big football
because he was
star.
football, and he was a
No.
big football player, and yet he was knitting, and we, even women, kind of say, but that's a woman's craft, or whatever term you want to use for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that a football player would do. So we are sometimes as much at fault of
Yeah.
labeling
Yeah.
things.
It's the culture we grow up in. You
Yeah.
do tend, like, for men to be a chef, not for a woman until Julia Childs.
Oh,
And yet who does
yes.
most of the creating and shopping and cooking of the family meal 7 days a week? Women.
Yeah.
And
But
yet,
men were chefs.
to give a toddler a kitchen, it's for women. It's for girls, and they're made in pink and blue, which is girls, and color how we ever got into that. Color is irrelevant. The pink isn't for girls and blue for boys. But we think of it that way, but that's cultural.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, chefs are men, and yet when we start with giving things to children to play with, we give
That's
the
true.
kitchen stuff to girls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
But
We never
my
bought
boys-
one for my
but I
two
think
sons, but we did for Kate.
Right.
When my boys were probably 3, 4, 5, 6, I gave them kitchen stuff. I had it. We didn't have a high porch. We just had a little small porch. But they played with their neighbors, usually in the front yard. And I gave them kitchen stuff. I gave them a little kitchen thing that I had trash picked somewhere, and dolls. And I told them I was teaching them how to become good fathers.
Oh.
And I remember one time my husband came home from work. He wasn't teaching, and he came home and he flew out of the car. What are my kids doing with these dolls? And I told him, I said, this is how it's going to be. They are learning to be a good father like you. So they did that as children. They did the other things that I didn't like with the sticks as guns and all the other boy things, climbing trees and falling out. But they also had their dolls and the things that they needed to become good fathers. And I think they are good fathers.
You're ahead of your time.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I don't know if it has changed or not, but I know that's what my niece gave her little boy. He was turned 4, well, he was like 3 and a half at last Christmas, and she got him a kitchen set, and because he liked playing with her stuff in the kitchen, so she got him his own stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I think maybe we're living through a generation where there is some change.
Oh,
yes.
Where I think,
considerable.
when we were children, it was definite. Now I think there's a little bit of intermixing between boys and girls and what they should and shouldn't be playing with. So it's kind of.
Well, think about school. When we got, I went to Ocean City High. When we got into high school, the girls, well, junior high actually, the girls had
Boys took shots.
sewing and cooking and kind of a home nursing thing. We learned how to properly make a bed with an invalid in it, how you could turn them from side to side. But the boys had wood shop and metal shop, which
Mechanical drawing.
I wish I knew how to do those things. I have a mental block
yeah.
now.
Yeah,
My daughter's not that way. She does anything, but
yeah.
I don't know how to do anything.
And
I just
I like to tell the story. They did take home when Matt was in school, and one time he was going out to something like a dance or something, and my mother was visiting, and she said, "Oh, do you want me to iron your shirt?" And Matt said, "No, I know how to do it myself." And he did because he took it in home ec. He learned how to iron. She was like, "He knows how to iron?" I said, "Yeah, he knows how to iron."
I think that was not so much in school. My mom said, okay, you had to pay board, you also had to clean your portions of the house, had to do your own laundry, you had to do your own ironing. So at a very young age, we had, if you want clean clothes, you wash them. My mom wasn't going to do all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I did with my boys, my kids.
Yeah.
And they really enjoyed ironing. It was fun
Yeah,
once
it's-
I taught them.
Yeah. I
They
like to
didn't
go to
iron
I like to go to the dry cleaners and let them iron. I'm a little lazy these
I like
days.
it on Mason.
Any other crafts or any other? You mentioned the football player knitting. Isn't that also a relaxing type of therapy where you're doing something with your hands and it? Because I've seen people who are knitting and they can still concentrate in the conversation, but they don't miss a beat when it comes to. But it seems that like this is an enjoyment, but it also feels good. It gives them something to do
Yes,
with
you're
their
right.
hands.
But it's still labeled as female as
Yeah.
opposed to male. And I think it even is today.
I do too, and I remember I remember going to a synod assembly probably in the 80s, and there were I would say at least 3, maybe 4 men
Mm-hmm.
in the area knitting while they were listening,
Yeah,
and it was really nice to see.
yeah.
But
It's
probably
unusual.
maybe even other men thought, "Oh my gosh, I don't."
Yeah, I
know."
was going to say, I'm sure that they had comments made
They did.
because of it.
They
Yeah.
did, but they did what they wanted to
They
do.
do, yeah.
and
Well, I'm
they
a big
made
Phillies
statement.
fan,
Oh.
and Jose Alvarado, who was a pitcher, started making bead necklaces as a way of relaxing between his pitching things. So he made necklaces, and if you watch the Phillies players at the games at all, a lot of them wear the red and white and blue necklace. He did it with the colors of, he's from Mexico, he did the Mexican flag for himself.
Oh.
And everybody else said, I really like that, so he started making them for other people.
Oh, that's,
And even the Bat Boy and everything had them.
it's going to be a treasure.
But
It's gonna
again,
be-
it was a relaxation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which he did.
Yeah, and productive.
But again, it's a man doing something that maybe we would think is only for women.
Or we would say that's an art. That's an art,
That's true.
rather than say craft, because a man's is artwork, whereas the woman it's a craft. I mean, it's again we're trying to put people in categories or things in categories.
Well, I was thinking of between arts and crafts and so forth. I was thinking about the cakes that some people decorate.
Oh
They're
my
really
goodness.
definitely works of art.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, especially those cooking shows. You ever see some of those?
Yeah.
I mean, I did watch Julia Child at a young age. I remember that, and I just thought it was funny what she did with the chicken. But
You're remembering
She
the
was-
SNL skit.
well, yeah, but I do remember the Julia Child, the chick. Whoops, it slipped. Oh, that's all right. she was funny, but it was again. I find that relaxing to watch someone cook because now there's. I do watch the Catholic show, EWTN. Sorry, and there's a Catholic priest who is a cook. He's Asian. But he also then takes a tour of that area where they have special meals and special cooks. And he then also encourages, he does a recipe along with telling about religion and talking about the site and their particular cuisine. And, but that's his creative work. And I find that, again, interesting. This is, not only am I getting an understanding about different cuisines and different foods, but also then how it ties in with that culture, with that community, with those foods, because he brings it to he lifts it up, because it's not all the same. Not everybody else has a Pizza Hut or Kentucky Fried Chicken and all those other foods, fast foods that I go to. But I find that, and I find it relaxing. I like to watch people cook because it's creative.
So then you don't follow the recipes yourself afterwards?
Let me see. I do cook. I mean, I can cook, and I did cook because Tuesday nights is what Mom says that's my night off. I'm not cooking. You guys have to fend for yourself. So I learned how to cook, or you make a sandwich or something like that. But I learned how to cook. I learned how to bake, and I follow the Betty Crocker book. Is this thick? It's one of those you keep adding stuff. And there were recipes that I would add with the help of my mom. She would give me some guidance, but yeah. So yeah, I can cook and everything, and of course it really does pay to follow the directions. Oh, there you go. But yeah, I find it somewhat relaxing to watch that. It's creative again. It's creative. I find that relaxing. I do watch also PBS, and I do watch the different art and the different people from different cultures producing their artwork. And looming is one of them. You ever watch them looming? And then not to mention the indigenous people making their particular arts with regards to their culture, their background, and their history. And then even to see their dance, their song, all that stuff, it's new to me. And even though it's not new, it's very old. It's a tradition that's now brought up. So that was a good question, wasn't it? Yeah. Number 2, share briefly about one or more of your creations of which you are particularly proud of. Well, I think I was 12, I think, give or take. And there's a Greek Orthodox church, St. Mary's, or Holy St. Mary's, Greek Orthodox Church, or a Madonna and Child. I'm going to say St. Mary's. But they had this Madonna and Child window. It was I didn't go to the church until I was in high school because it was right next to the Milwaukee Lutheran High School. Then I went to their church. I didn't realize service was 3 hours long. But I said, boy, I love the hour service. I said, I'm glad I'm a Lutheran. It's only an hour. But there was 3 hours. But the window was magnificent. But it was in a newspaper. And so I cut that out and saved it. And then you can take a newspaper, and I asked Dad, I didn't do it, but he made a round circle, wood, and then I pasted it. You know, you paste it on it. I still have it to this day. I'm very proud of that. Because it's Madonna and Child, I think of Christmas. So, and Dad helped me with it. But it was one of those things where you take jigsaw puzzle and you put that paste on it, and then you got a portrait, you know. So I was doing stuff like that, taking something like that I saw in a newspaper and then save it, but then put it on a durable background. But my dad helped me with that. But I'm very proud of that. It's not much, but to me it's something from my past, but I still appreciate it. And it's Greek, so it has Alpha and Omega on it. It has all these symbols that the Greek Orthodox teach through their windows about the theology of Jesus and then relationship with Mary.
Nice.
So that's a simple thing. What about your creation? Do you still have it?
I do photography. I take pictures and then play around with it to enlarge it or turn it a little bit or make it black and white rather than color or something like that.
Do you frame it?
That's a whole nother thing. Yes, but not professionally. I just like to go to the thrift store when they're having their sales and see which one kind of goes with the picture. And it's, you know, photography can get to be very expensive. And then you add the framing and the glass and the whole bit. So I just use that as kind of my thrift store hobby. To find
artwork.
frames. And I got a couple of nice pictures. You always take more than what you're really happy with. Digital is nice. And then there's one thing that my mother was a fabulous quilter. She made quilts for everybody in the family, and I was not good with sewing, but I could pick things out that I liked that I thought would go together. And together with my mom, my mom and I made a small quilt, just kind of a little lap thing. And she kept looking at it and saying, that's pretty wild. I don't know how we're going to be able to do that. But she worked with me, and so one side is very muted, and it's the typical little squares like she liked to do. But if you flip it over, it's these wild, bright paisley kinds of thing, really big. And so how are we going to finish it off? And I picked a wide black rickrack. You know what rickrack is? And we put that on there, and so it brings out a little spark in the dull side, and it tones down a little bit the other side. I will never part with that.
Oh, yeah.
But that'll be the only one.
Well, when we had our knitting group, I used to enjoy knitting, and we would give the blankets and things to either pregnancy center or
shut-ins. We did that one year for all the shut-ins.
And that's a good feeling. I didn't need baby blankets, but I could make them and give them to someone who could use them.
Yeah, and we have our Mother's Day thing. There were lots of handmade quilts or knitted items that went.
Anybody else?
I do a little bit of everything.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you mentioned painting. Yeah, besides creative.
Here's one of my paintings. This is the first. We did watercolors, and I'm not good at watercolors, but I'm getting better.
I like that.
I do too.
I remember my grandmother on my dad's side, Eleanor, they would make Christmas ornaments.
Yeah, I did that
And
many years.
Some of
Gave it
them
to
were
all my
very amazing. I mean, they were not something like, oh, they kind of like, it was art to put that stuff together, and it was very special, very beautiful, because that was way back when. Again, it would be considered a craft, but I have this paper angel, just paper. It's now yellow because it's that old. It was a white, pristine, fresh angel, and it's still on a string, and it was cut with that real sharp knife.
Exactly.
And so it was 2 angels cut, folded in half, glued in the center, and then you have a wing here, a wing here, a wing here, and a wing here. But it would spin with just the breeze, just the wind. And I have it hanging all year round. I don't know where that came from. Obviously, a Christmas bazaar. I must have thought it was I like things that move in the wind or a breeze. Kind of reminds me of the spirit. I just gave a pinwheel to a neighbor today to honor her 80th birthday. She says, I don't understand how did I come 80? I said, because your life's been spinning, so just keep this spinner. Her mom's going to be 100 next month.
Oh.
So I says, it's in your family. She says, I don't know if I'll remember 100. Don't worry, everybody else will, and I'll remind you you're 100. So that's how it works. But yeah, I gave her, because I like to see things spin or move in the wind. And so I like things that are like very light, and that just, or even with light. Some things can spin with the light reflecting on it. It's pretty impressive. I like that kind of stuff. So, but it was a craft thing. I don't know. I got it. And someday I'm going to get not a scissors, but I have to get that sharp tool, make a fresh angel. So right now it's a yellow angel, pale yellow. So, on to the hour is now. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
We need to read John 2, 1 through 12. This is a rereading, which is okay. Repetition is the mother of all learning, and we always read these gospel stories over and over again in the pericopes because it's a 3-year cycle. So who'd like to read John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12? How about you, Elaine?
I haven't found it yet, but as soon as I do, I will.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
No, I have John. I just haven't found John too.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 1. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith unto him, They have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith to the servants, Whosoever who saith you, do it. And there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Jesus saith unto them, Fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. And he saith unto them, Draw out now, and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and knew not whence it was, but the servant which drew the water knew, the governor of the feast called the bridegroom, and saith unto him, Every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine, and when men have well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. After this he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brother and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. I think we should read this not from the King James Version.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
But it's interesting because everything in that translation is men.
Yes.
The men were drunk, they took it to the man.
Right.
If you read it out of Good News, which isn't totally modern. I mean, that's been around a while too. It talks about people as opposed to men. And if we read this in a newer
Right.
translation even, it would take most of the sexist language out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, is there such a thing as a women's perspective Bible?
Yes, there is. Yeah, I have one.
Oh, that would be interesting. You should
Yeah.
bring that.
I should.
And then we
especially
could,
for this section of
well,
the study.
of our study, yeah.
Let me rephrase this. I think I have.
Well,
I didn't
you're-
change
I
the
will
wording Jews to Judeans, but
oh, that's all
I
right.
figured
That's
because
all
I'm
right.
reading from
You're reading the King James. You're going to have to go with what they
I
got
have a
there.
woman's
I
study
mean, you
Bible,
can't
but it
remember
doesn't
everything
say
to
anything.
change it.
She has a woman's
I have a woman's study
Ah.
Bible, but it
Doesn't really.
doesn't say anything about. But it doesn't just emphasize men. It says
It's an NRSV.
yeah. NIV.
I'm just,
Oh, it's all right. It's still it's a King James, but it's a revised King
Yeah.
James version.
It's a revised
Mm.
King James. There's a lot of different kind of Bibles out there, but I do.
Yes, I
I
know.
just. Yeah.
Well, there are times when I'm reading on Sunday morning, I will change the words. Pentecost Sunday says, "Men of Jerusalem."
you said people.
I put in there, "people of Jerusalem." I won't read "men of Jerusalem." I'm sorry, the scripture is for today. The scripture is for all of us,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and so I changed the words.
Yeah, and that's a cultural change, right? Because when you look at the first beginning, men were the only ones that were considered important at the time. But Jesus is the one that broke those boundaries anyway, when women were allowed to be part of this mission of the gospel. And the first person to bring the news of the resurrection was a woman, not a
Well,
man.
and it says, there are places it says, and there were 5,000 men plus women and children.
Yeah.
So women and children were not counted as part of the original 5,000, or if you read it, the 3,000.
Yeah.
They were extras, and they were counted. They weren't counted. They were just known that to be there.
Yeah.
Well, in reading this, I imagine that the women were not allowed to drink the wine.
Probably not.
Probably not. They were there to serve
It even says
or clean up.
the men after they have well drunk.
Yeah.
So it
Well, you wouldn't want, a woman wouldn't be allowed to be drunk.
no.
No.
But even in Old Testament times, there were women who had far more power than some men in the throughout the Old Testament, throughout all of history, if you really think about it.
Oh yeah.
Fortunately.
Yeah, but it was, what do you call it? That would be, what was that? I want to say something unusual.
The exception.
Yeah, that's the word. That's exceptional. You know, but then they move. Then they go back to the men again.
Mhm.
You know, go back to the norm.
Yeah.
Years ago, Mary, I think we did a Bible study on women of the Bible, which I thought was really interesting because women have played a lesser role, but they have a role in the telling of this
Oh, yes.
story.
And
Well,
some of
we
them.
all grew up with congregation councils being all men. I'm
yeah.
sure we did.
Sure.
I mean, I certainly did.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Even just
All
the
of
ushers
them.
being all men.
That's exactly right. Oh, yes, I do recall the Sunday in Mount Holly. So this can't be that long ago because I didn't move to New Jersey until, well, it was 50 years ago, but that sounds like forever when you say it that way. But in my lifetime, I mean, I'm not talking about my mother's generation, I'm talking about my generation. We were missing an usher on Sunday morning. You know, it was time for the offering, and Mount Holly had it very definitely that this is how it was done. And we didn't have somewhere that they miscounted. And I'm standing in the narthex, and so I just jumped, all know me well enough, I just jumped right in. You could hear. And the head usher had an absolute fit, but that broke the barrier. But I had kids come to me and say, teenage girls, can you talk to pastor and see if we can be acolytes?
Oh,
And the pastor said no.
Yeah. Well, and all the pastors were male too.
That's right.
well, no.
And even as we began to ordain females, no, because as you get older, it's the men who tend to leave the church. The women are always here. So therefore, we want to have only boys so that we keep the boys coming to church. That was the thinking.
That
of
was
it.
said as recently when I lived in Lincoln, and that, yes, now it's been 10 years, but there was a request for the girls to be altar servers, and the bottom line that was quoted was, if we let the girls start doing it, that's all we'll have, because the boys will stop doing it. I mean, not because the girls are up there, but because they'll be like, let the girls do it. You know, we don't have to be on call anymore to be the altar server.
You know,
And so
sometimes-
women would take over. I mean, they just do it. They don't.
Sometimes I feel that's what's happening in many congregations now. I can, and for a number of years, the men are saying, let them do it. I can sense that happening.
And it's the sense. Look on Sunday. Who was down here serving the lunch?
Every couple men,
Well,
one
the
man.
women's group.
It was women. And we just assume, that the women of the church will make the goodies, will make the coffee, will serve for the luncheon. That's an assumption.
You know, I was on
So
a
we're not helping the situation.
No, we're not. But I was on a church council in the early 70s, and you had to be voted in. And usually
Oh yeah.
all the men would be voted in, and then there'd be a token, and that's how I was voted in. But then I noticed as time progressed, more women were running for council, and more men were starting to think, well, let them do it. I've got other things more important to me. That's just my perception, and maybe it was wrong, but I don't think it was.
Well, I was serving on church council here when the discussion was about women being ushers, and do you know what one of the big concerns was? Would they dress appropriately? What does that mean?
I was going to say, what's
Yeah.
I
appropriate?
mean, back then the men had to wear a dress shirt, tie, a
Mhm.
suit, or at least a
Yeah,
jacket.
but men did.
Mhm.
I mean, in fact, I was talking to one of the ushers on, was it this Sunday? Maybe it was this Sunday, who was there in a coat and tie,
Yes.
who's not usually there that way. And I went and I said, oh, I'm impressed. I mean, and then I said, I apologize, I didn't mean to. But then we got into that discussion, and I said, you know, he remembered, and I do too, when in the summer you didn't have air conditioning in the churches, and men still wore a coat and tie every Sunday to church because that's what you did. And women certainly would have been dressed appropriately.
They might have worn mini skirts,
With a hat.
Or hands.
tight pants. That was before jeans were even thought of in church. Nobody would have worn jeans back then.
Well, we couldn't wear skirts. I mean, we couldn't wear long pants to school. We wore skirts.
So
But
times
we have
change.
not always helped the situation. We as women have sometimes hindered that transition.
When you had like special Thanksgiving dinners and all that, did the council itself help out in that? Besides,
Oh, our Thanksgiving dinner had a
A lot of help.
there's a leader. Those two ran the Thanksgiving dinner for a number of years,
there was
and we had a lot of people. We had
Men
it was a
and
total mix.
Yeah,
we had
and
young people. We had,
Families volunteered.
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we did, and they were from because it was not the Thanksgiving dinner wasn't from St. John. It was from the ecumenical group,
Okay.
so that we had other people from other congregations volunteering coming in on
Okay.
Like
Thanksgiving
we had
Day.
a gentleman, his in-laws lived in town, but he never lived in town. He lived in Vermont, but he would
Right.
come down here for Thanksgiving, and
Wow.
he just happened to come here, and then he came every year for I don't know how many years.
Wow.
He
Many.
says, I'm in charge of the coffee. I'm like, okay, go ahead.
And
Huh.
we had people from Pennsylvania who would summer here and they would
Mhm.
come with their families.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had.
So
tons
there
of
is
help.
some give and take then at those
Mhm.
big events,
Yeah.
and then you see them
I
more.
mean, a lot of times it was the dad and the kids,
Yeah.
Right.
because the mom was still home cooking.
Mom is
Oh
home
yeah,
cooking, yeah.
that's true too. That's true. Well, where are we here? Are we gonna?
We just read John, so.
Oh yeah, that's right. We just read John, so now we can start in.
Carol, it's your turn.
Last, let's see, Carol, you want to
Carol.
read last
Sure.
month?
Last month we tackled this passage by way of the now, found in verse 10. Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now. We are going to revisit that text, taking into account that now, but considering Jesus' mama in verse 1 through 5. It's easy to read scriptures in a very serious way, one that seems to carry the appropriate solemnity, but in fact, there's a lot of humor in scripture. This passage is an example of that. We don't know whose wedding this is. We do know that the wedding at that time were not trivial events, and often the celebration would last a week. In this text, the meaning of the third day is not entirely clear. Even for someone bad at math, counting the passing of days mentioned within John 1 doesn't add up to this being the third day of the story. Maybe it referred to the third day of the wedding festivities. If so, it is no wonder that the caterers, so to speak, have run out of wine. Want me to continue?
Barbie, want to read?
What is also not clear is why Jesus' mother is there. Perhaps she is, in typical rule for a woman there, I can't even see it,
You want this?
there or now.
I got a magnifying glass.
No, there was a glare on it.
Okay.
Is there as a helper, or perhaps she's there as a guest? What is clear is that she is on wine detail. When the jugs run dry, she does what's needed to be done. She tells her son. Mothers have a habit of assuming that their children are the best, the most, the only ones capable of fill in the blank. Mary is not alone in this regard, but in this case it seems as if her hunch is right. She goes to Jesus and says they have no wine, with the clear intent that he will do something about it. His response is less than obliging. Woman, he responds, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come. First, initially, it is a little off-putting that he calls her woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have been mad at him.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yes,
That's what
in
that
my
is.
family, that would have been, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, right.
Excuse me, I would have said, you get out there and you get that wine.
And not only that, this is your mom you're talking to.
Talking to me that way? I think not.
Well, let's see. I mean, who John wrote this, so maybe John had to make that put in there. But you know how people, when you're in a position of authority or leadership, all of a sudden you can't speak about your mom. You have to put her in her place and say woman. That type of thing versus, do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't think it was said that way.
No, I don't.
know it was.
I think, but I'm just saying, if that's that sense of, now I'm going to do my work, but now,
Yeah.
But you're right. It's it throws you off. It just throws you off. Lisa throws me off too. Well, should I read on?
But as it turns out, this seems to be a common way he refers to her. Look at John 19:25 or 26. I mean, when he is on the cross and addresses her, perhaps it is even a term of endearment. My husband, in fact, will look at me and use that term with a grin and a twinkle, and with no trouble at all, gets away with it.
Do you remember that when he says,
Yeah.
And behold your son.
yeah, woman, behold your son?
Yes.
And did he say then John? Son, behold your mother?
I believe that's
Yes.
how it goes.
Yeah,
but
so
I'll look it up
basically
if you want.
emphasizing
19.
their gender,
Yes.
but then saying you belong to you belong to each other.
26. Standing close to Jesus' cross were his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing there, so he said to his mother, "He is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "She is your mother."
Oh, okay, that takes.
That's the way it comes
Sounds
out
like
here.
good news.
Well, how does it say in King James?
It's the same thing. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by, to whom he loved, he saith to his mother, Woman, behold thy
Oh.
son.
There you go.
There you
There's the
go.
one.
And he saith to the disciples, Behold thy mother.
Yeah. Okay.
I could continue.
I'm not
Yes.
sure I would appreciate my husband calling me woman. I'm not sure it would. Even if he had a twinkle in his eye, as a possible joke, I think that would annoy me. I don't know why, but it does.
I think it speaks of a position of power, position of authority over someone, woman.
I've heard it used, and both parties have taken it as a joke, just because you can say what you want, but you know who's in charge. This is what comes through. You know, you can say, "Woman, in this house, we will." Okay, you've said your piece. Go away. We'll do it my way. That's kind of the way it
I
works
think it's
itself
just
out.
because it's so impersonal. Woman?
Yeah. But again, it could be that's the way of the culture at that time too.
Mm.
Distinction between a man's role and a woman's role.
And remember, this is somebody else writing
That's
these.
true.
I was thinking the
So
same
is
thing.
that what Jesus said? I don't know.
No.
But when
Because the person, first of all, isn't recording it and isn't writing it down now.
It's right
It's being written
what he remembered.
years sometimes later. So is that the actual word Jesus used?
Yeah.
And does it matter?
But I'm thinking the writer of this article is saying that her husband sometimes calls her
Exactly,
woman.
yeah. Well, as you said,
Which
not
is
in my
in
house.
present day,
No,
yeah,
I agree
so
with you now.
Yeah. Well, everybody again, families. You'd be what? But and in some families it's okay.
It's a personal thing, I guess.
Yeah. Can you read on, Barbara?
As for the what concern is that to you and to me portion of the verse, it's possible that Jesus is indicating that the lack of wine is a problem, but not theirs. This would imply that Mary is there as a guest rather than as a helper. And anyway, Jesus goes on to say it's not the time for him to show his stuff. My hour is not yet come. But here is where the text turns a bit funny. Mary's response, it's not to demur, it's not to acknowledge that he has a point, it's not to get back to the party, muttering under her breath. Instead, she turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you. I like to imagine what happened between Jesus and his mama is between those two moments. I invite you to do the same. When I intend to come out is that where I intend to come out is that the two of them are having a mama-son stare down. After which Mary turns to the stewards and tells them to do what she knows, and now her son knows. He will tell them to do. In a flash of time, it's as if Mary is saying, Jesus, about that hour that hasn't come yet, it's now.
Mm.
a womanist theologian, Dr. Will Gaffney, writes,
In John 2, Mary, the mother of Jesus, prompts him to reveal himself in the miracle that is understood as the formal inauguration of his public ministry, verse 3. In so doing, she leaves us with profound instructions for our Christian faith in verse 5. Do whatever he tells you. From Epiphany 5 in a women's lectionary for the whole church, year W, Church Publishing 2021. Isn't that interesting? Year W, year of the woman. Mary is good at seeing three things. Number one, the need. Number two, that Jesus can meet it. Number three, that this need must be met now, immediately, rather than waiting for a later time. So it says, read again John 2, 1 through 12. Repetition is the mother of all learning. If you don't mind, can I read it for you all?
Yeah, something other than King James.
Okay, I've got the NSRE. It's little, that is the book, but the print's better for me. Okay. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. Jesus said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they remained there a few days. Okay, has your view of this reading changed? If so, how? I think the third day was a good way to be reminded that the wedding could last a week. Most weddings last a day or half a day, all night long.
Depends on the reception.
Yeah, because is there enough wine yet to drink? But the third day, I said, well, that makes sense if the wine's gone. But they're supposed to have wine for the whole week. Wow, that's a lot of wine.
But in the Bible, the third day has another meaning.
Yes, Resurrection Day.
So is there a connection between the beginning of Jesus' ministry on earth and the end of Jesus' ministry on earth?
Well, I think Jesus' ministry continues even after his resurrection.
Well, true, but he physically is not sitting in this chair.
No, not physically. Spiritually.
So that was the beginning of his ministry, was on the third day. The end of his physical being on earth ministry took place after the third day.
Yeah, it could be an emphasis that John wants to make that he's resurrected. His
Or am
minist-
I reading too much into it?
No. I think it's okay with that. It's all good because the third day is because she says what she even questions that too, you know, and I just when she mentioned that the wedding could be a week long, I said, well, that now it makes sense why the week I never really paid attention to that third day. I mean, I've heard it and I've read it, but it's not something in my radar until I read this. And Mary obviously says this is important. And she's going to take it to her son. So to me, that was an important perspective. And then, you know where I went with this? Funerals years ago did not happen all in a day. There was this sitting of waiting for the body would be in place at the house, in the parlor, and people would have to come in their buggies and everything, and it would be a week or I don't know how long until they could finally get to the point where it's they're all the families here. Now we do the service and then the burial and then we do the celebration after. But that would be not just a day; that would be a week or 2 weeks. Because of all the traveling and the time. So I'm just saying that's what came to my mind. Things took longer years ago. And I guess the wedding feast, this was important. So was the funeral. It's important. It doesn't happen in a day. People can't get there in a day. So I was thinking of the time thing. Anything else?
I think in first reading of it, you concentrate on the fact that the water had been turned to wine, and the miracle where you don't really think about Mary. And really, I think Mary realizes that her son has more to do in this life and will change things. I think Mary comes out here as recognizing that Jesus, because she says, do what he tells you to do. So I think she kind of recognizes that he has work to do.
Yeah, before, I'm not going to say she's clueless, but when at age 12 he's left behind and they're like, what are you doing here? You don't get that same sense of, oh, well, I know why he's here. This is part of his mission, kind of thing. And I think there's a couple of other places before this happens, possibly where there's some question as to what's going on with Jesus. He's kind of a little out of the ordinary here, and I think she sends his brothers to bring him home.
His ministry.
So at that point, it's not like you said. There's more that his life is meant to bring to the world. But this might be her aha moment.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's a woman saying, now, you do it, now.
Yeah.
I'm your mom. So, and I may be wrong, but I think in the woman's Bible, they would call that the first miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because a woman said, you do it now. So there's some good news for women.
Yeah.
And this shows it.
Yeah, she went in the right direction. She went to her son, Jesus. But maybe not just because he is her son, but because there's more to this Jesus than meets the eye. And she always, when Mary was going to be the mother of God, Theotokos, and she got that message from an angel, she pondered these things.
Mm-hmm.
What does this all mean? What's going to happen? How is this going to unfold? How is this going to... And I mean, then they had to go to Egypt, escape Herod, so then you had to feed... I mean, God protected them by get out of there. You have to go, find a place to stay in safety until Herod died. And in the meantime, Jesus is growing up. There's still things... We don't see all that story, unless you read the Gospel of Thomas, but then everybody says that's the Apocrypha. But Jesus does things as a child. He creates birds out of clay and then makes them alive, and then they fly away. So, did he use his power and use that? But I would like to focus on John the Baptist emphasis, where he says, after he receives baptism from John, it says, you must do the right thing. He even says, no, you must baptize me. I'm not supposed to baptize. He says, you do the right thing. The right thing is, this is how it's going to be. Baptize me. He humbled himself, and then he went into the wilderness and then struggled with, how is this ministry going to work? How is this ministry going to be brought out? And John kept baptizing, and then Jesus kept baptizing with the disciples, and then John was arrested because he went into the city. If he would have stayed out in the country, he wouldn't have been arrested. But he had to go talk to the Herod and say, you're sitting.
Yeah.
And then he got put in jail, and then that was the end of John.
I always think to myself, she raised him, she did everything as a mother, and he's probably 30 by now, and she's probably thinking, for Pete's sake.
Leave the nest.
Yeah. It's time. I mean, already at age 12, you're supposed to be an adult, right? In the Jewish culture?
Oh, for the bar mitzvah?
Yeah, the bar mitzvah. It's like it's confirmation. You become the adult now. In the Christian, in a Lutheran Christian circles, you're confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
Now you take on an adult status. So, and that's when he was. He was in the temple teaching the Pharisees and the Sadducees things about his father, and they were saying, where do you get all this wisdom from? Consider a time when you saw a need before someone else did. How did that make you feel? What did you do? Oh, it's a time? Oh, okay. Well, think about that one. What can we learn from Mary in John 2 and Dr. Gaffney, that are called to address urgent, pressing needs now? Tell someone. That's what I wrote down. Tell someone. Call someone. Get it out. So I have a prayer that I picked out, but I also picked it up because of what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and the war, and all those who are suffering on both sides, and those who are suffering here because of family, relatives, and those who, I think of the trip to Holy Land, and I knew that people were scared of me going, and but I said it's safer there than it is in some places in the United States, so I did. I went to the Holy Land and came back, but now I think about those tourists who are there now, and the fear. So.
And all of us, we're all suffering because of what's happening there.
Oh yes, because of we share that sorrow, that loss. So the Lord be with you.
Also you.
Loving God, whose Son was both victim and victor, we cry to you for those who suffer, especially in this war between Israel and the Palestinians, Hamas, especially terrorist group. Be with them and us in their confusion and our confusion and pain. Heal the wounds of body and mind. Break open the prisons of fear, self-doubt, and despair. And strengthen all of us to face the future with faith, hope, and courage. Reach out to our brothers and sisters in Israel and the Palestinian territory with your love, that they may be made whole in body, mind, and spirit through the healing touch of the suffering Christ. Amen.
Amen.
God's peace be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.